Good morning. My name's Brian Campbell. I am the Director of Curriculum, Assessment, and Instruction in the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education with Deputy STEM. I want to welcome everyone back this morning. It's good to see a crowd. Always the morning of the second day, you're a little worried about the out-of-towners and how many people hit the chocolate world and the outlets and everything, so it's great to see everyone back. This is my second year at the Institute as a member of the department, and before that I came probably all 7 or 8 years that I was administrator. I always very much liked this event, so I'm very glad to see everyone here. I was talking this morning with Jean and some members of the press group, and they said that yesterday's SAS event and particularly George Koros in the morning was the most tweeted and retweeted thing in the history of the department feed. So thank you very much for your participation and enthusiasm and excitement and participation in all these things moving forward. And well-placed segue, as we talk about enthusiasm and our love for education and things like that. This morning I'm pleased to welcome Michael Sosko, who was our 2017 Pennsylvania Teacher of the Year. Very good. That rarely happens when you say that. That's great. Michael's going to come up. He has a few words for you, and then he's going to introduce our 2017 National Teacher of the Year. So, Michael.
Thank you. I'm not Michael, but I am Becca Foxwell, and I'm the 2016-2017 Pennsylvania Teacher of the Year. Thank you. Mike is our awesome 2017-2018 Teacher of the Year, but I am excited and so honored to get to introduce our keynote speaker this morning, Sydney Chaffee. Sydney is the 2017 National Teacher of the Year, which I think... She is also the 2017 Massachusetts State Teacher of the Year. I was first blessed to get to meet Sydney about a year ago at our first event in Dallas, Texas. All the State Teachers of the Year came to Dallas for our first event. And I remember once we got there, a bunch of us were hungry when we first arrived that evening and decided to grab a bite in the restaurant in the hotel. And I actually got to be seated right next to Sydney, and I'd only heard her name, I hadn't met her yet, and so I was really excited to get to sit next to her. And as I ate my turkey club sandwich, I remember Sydney sharing this story about a quest to find the perfect stuffed animal for her 3-year-old daughter, Zoe. That night, I was immediately captivated by her energetic spirit, her flair for storytelling, and her heart for those around her. It will not take you long this morning to realize that Sydney's greatest passion is for her students. I love hearing stories about Sydney's kids. I actually really love hearing any story that Sydney has to tell, because as you are going to get to experience this morning, she is a dynamic storyteller. But I really love when she shares stories about her kids because her heart and eyes light up. Sydney is committed to taking risks every day for her students in order to transform their lives through authentic learning experiences. Sydney also challenges me on a regular basis, as well as every educator she meets, to be brave, to take risks, to not be afraid to do its best for kids. I'm so excited for you to get to hear from her heart this morning. I'm also really excited because she's giving a workshop right after this, so if you don't have a place to go yet, I highly encourage you to check her workshop out. I heard some details yesterday, and I'm really looking forward to it. But would you please join me this morning in giving a warm Pennsylvania welcome to my friend and the 2017 National Teacher of the Year, Sydney Chaffee.
Pennsylvanians, is that the right term? Pennsylvanians are the nicest people I have yet encountered in the country, and I've been in a lot of places. The lady at the airport yesterday who had us pay for our parking was the nicest woman I have encountered in several weeks. It really caught me off guard. I've received several hugs this morning from people I have never met before, so I just want to congratulate you all. Pennsylvania is a very kind and welcoming state. It's really nice. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna do a little technical wizardry here, by which I mean I'm gonna pull up a PowerPoint. Hold on. Boom. Okay, ready? This is me. And it's around the time that I started kindergarten. I think I might be a little bit younger, but on my first day of kindergarten, my mother dropped me off at school. And then she got back in the car and she drove to her first day of school because she had decided to re-enroll in college after 10 years away. And I didn't realize it at the time, but the most important lesson I took from my mom's return to school was her modeling about how being a lifelong learner requires a balance of optimism and daring. By going back to college, she taught me that growth requires taking risks. And my mom took risks her whole life. That morning, she walked into a classroom as the oldest student in the room after being told since she was a child that she was stupid. She ran headfirst into a terrifyingly uncertain future, risking the failure that she had been assured was her destiny. And she ended up earning her degree, and then another one for good measure, and then becoming a teacher just because she was bored. I lost my mom a few years ago, but her legacy lives on in my belief that without taking risks to do what scares us, we doom ourselves to stasis, to a life without growth or discovery or the thrill of accomplishing what we thought was impossible. And as educators, that philosophy is especially important because great educators are constantly innovating. We never stop trying to figure out the best ways to engage our students in doing the hard work of thinking and learning. Innovation and risk-taking go hand in hand. But there's a flip side to all of that risk-taking, and that's the very real possibility of failure. I work at a school in the EL Education Network. EL Education used to be called Expeditionary Learning, and it's built around these 10 design principles, my favorite of which is the one that's called success and failure. So in EL schools, we think it's important for students to experience both success and failure, because perseverance through adversity results in growth and a greater willingness to take healthy risks in the future. And so, in that spirit, my students all participate, some under great duress, in the National Poetry Out Loud Recitation Competition each year. So it's a great program. Every student chooses a poem, they memorize it, and they recite it in front of an audience. And through deeply studying the poem, they build literacy skills and they gain confidence as public speakers. And every year, a few kids catch fire with this project. They find that perfect poem, and they fully inhabit it. It's like they wrote it. And they begin to rehearse their performance in front of the class, and the room goes silent because their peers are in awe of them. One girl in particular, I'll call her Jean, had this power in her performance a couple of years ago. I'd catch other kids reciting bits of pieces of her poem in the hallways because they couldn't shake it. And she and I worked together after school to get everything just right. And she told me, I'm gonna win that prize. So I wanna show you a video of Jean's performance at the semi-final competition. So.
I'm a Fool to Love You by Cornelius Eady. Some folks will tell you the blues is a woman, some type of supernatural creature. My mother would tell you, if she could, about her life with my father, a strange and sometimes cruel gentleman. She would tell you about the choices a young black woman faces. Is falling in love with some man to deal with the devil? In blue terms, the tongue we use when we don't want nuance to get in the way, when we need to talk straight. My mother chose my father after choosing a man who was, as we sing it, of no account. This man made my father look good. That's how bad it was. He made my father seem like an island in the middle of a stormy sea. He made my father look like a rock. And is the blues the moment you realize you exist in a stacked deck? You look in the mirror at your young face, the face my sister carries, and you know it's the only leverage you've got. Does this create a hurt that whispers, how are you going to do? Is the blues the moment you shrug your shoulders and agree? A girl without money is nothing, dust to be pushed around by any old breeze? Compared to this, my father seems, briefly, to be a fire escape. This is the way the blues work to sorry wonders. Makes trouble look like a featherbed. Makes the wrong man's kisses a healing. Thank you.
Okay, so that performance put Jean in the top 10 for the school, for the 9th grade, and it meant that a few weeks later, she would compete against students from other schools, and then potentially go on to compete, against kids from other states, and if she made it all the way to Washington, D.C., she would be competing for $20,000. And everyone in the school was sure that she was going to be the winner of our school based on that performance. On the morning of the big competition, she was ready. All the other kids who were finalists were nervous, but she wasn't. And her peers all said, "You're gonna win," because they'd seen that same performance that you did, but they'd seen it in person. So Jean takes the stage really confidently that morning. And then in the middle of her poem, someone sneezed, and she got flustered, and she forgot a line. And she made it all the way through the rest of the poem, but as soon as she walked off the stage, she broke down and cried. Big, silent tears streaking down her cheeks. And she said to me, "I was horrible. I failed." I did my best to console her. There's a heartbreaking hopelessness in hearing a child give up on herself. I talked to her about her growth, about the power of her performance, about her strength and her success in finishing the poem despite what happened, but she was unconvinced. But 5 months later, Jean had a starring role in our end-of-year play. So here's a picture, hopefully. Yes, so here's a picture of the kids on the final moment of that play. And in fact, Jean in that play played the title role. She had more lines than anyone else. And she had decided, with help and encouragement from her teachers and her classmates, that she didn't want to let that failure in the poetry competition define her. She practiced improvising when things went wrong during rehearsals, and she was ready. When one of her castmates flubbed a line during the play, she rescued the scene without missing a beat. And her performance was full of life. She was funny, she was real, she made the audience believe the story and care about the character. And on that night, her triumph was electric. Failure turns into success when we see it as an opportunity to learn and to grow. But to do that requires confronting deep-seated insecurities. I read an article that said that the fear of failure is directly linked to your self-worth, or the belief that you are valuable as a person. Students, understandably, avoid putting themselves in situations where their self-worth might be threatened by failure. But that thought process is not unique to young people alone. A few years ago, I decided to begin the process of applying for national board certification in teaching. I wanted to push myself as a practitioner and as a professional without leaving the classroom, because too often classroom teachers are told that there's an expiration date on our careers, that after 5 or 10 years, we should really get serious about moving into administration. And reasons given for that vary, right? Some well-meaning folks cite the ability to reach more students, others talk about flexibility or salary, but the underlying message is that being a teacher is not enough. That being a teacher is a stopover on the way to something more respectable, and if we want to be taken seriously, we're going to need to get out of the classroom. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with being an administrator. Administrators are great, and there are a lot of you in the room who are doing really amazing work. But for me, that wasn't the right choice. So instead, I started down the path to getting certified through the national board. And after 2 years of work, I clicked submit, and I waited. And I found out that I had failed in the middle of the night a few months later. I was up with my infant daughter, and I reread the score report through tears of exhaustion. I'd missed earning national board certification by 1/10 of a point. And at first I was in denial. I figured there must have been a mistake. And then I moved into a short-lived period of righteous anger, followed quickly by shame. I doubted my own ability as a teacher. I wondered how long I could get away with not telling anyone what had happened. And maybe they would forget that I had applied in the first place if I just never mentioned it again. But then I remembered what I tell my students. It's not our failures that define us. It's the choices we make next. What could be a more powerful way to empathize with my students than experiencing that kind of failure firsthand? Ultimately, my failure drove me to reevaluate my practice. I reviewed the national board's feedback, I researched and read, I found a mentor, and most importantly, I redefined what the failure truly meant. It didn't mean that I was a poor teacher with no place in the classroom. It didn't mean that I was ruining children's lives on a daily basis. It meant that I now knew a specific area in which I needed to grow. Reframing that failure as an opportunity to better serve my kids, I designed a new class discussion protocol that would support diverse learners in the hard work of careful reading, active listening, confident speaking, and deep thinking. And other teachers began using the materials that I designed in their own classrooms. Kids got better at discussing complex ideas with one another, and this time around, I earned that certification. So often, we focus only on outcomes. We hold up these snapshots of success. But in that celebration, we can miss the truly important and the truly inspiring part of the story. We all are who we are and where we are today because we have sometimes failed and picked ourselves up and tried it again. Failure has to be part of our conversations about success. And if we're truly going to talk about innovating, we've also got to be willing to talk about failure. So, no time like the present, I want to invite you right now to either think or write about one of your own failures. I want you to remember a time, maybe it was really recent. My most recent failure was this morning. It has to do with that video. Maybe it was recent, maybe it was a while ago, okay, when you stumbled, when you didn't achieve what you thought you would achieve, when you messed something up. I want you to think about a failure that you're holding on to in some way, or that you're embarrassed or you're hurt by, and just take 2 minutes to write about it or think about it, okay? So I've got a few prompts up here. I actually want you to do this. Take 2 minutes and think or write about a recent failure that you're holding on to. All right, we're gonna pretend that was 2 minutes and blame the video snafu, okay? So, I want you to hang on to that for a minute, whatever that failure was that you were thinking or writing about. I was at a conference a couple of years ago, and the keynote speaker was this really inspiring man named Jonathan Poulard. And at the beginning of his time with us, he asked us to take a stone in our hand and hold on to it. He literally passed out stones to everyone in the room. And he told us to hold that stone in our hands for the rest of his talk. And at the end of his talk, which was maybe 40 minutes later, he told us that this exercise actually came from a book written by Archbishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa. And the exercise is called Carrying the Stone. And so in the exercise, Tutu says you have to hold the stone in your hand for an entire morning, for 6 hours, without putting it down for any reason, without switching hands. And after the morning is over, he says you should do some journaling and you should reflect on these questions. And the exercise comes from Tutu's book on forgiveness. And Jonathan Poulard argued during his talk that carrying around stones represents carrying around unforgiven hurts. It represents carrying around things that we're hanging on to, that we're resentful about, that we're angry about or hurt by. And when we're carrying those around, like having the stone in our hand, it makes it hard for us to accomplish anything else. So what I want you to do now is to adapt a couple of Tutu's journaling prompts to thinking about failure, like we just did. Okay, so I want you to think about for a second how carrying the memory of that failure serves you. Is it ever useful to you to think about and carry around that failure? Does it ever prevent you from completing any other activities? And what might you need to do to let that failure go? So I'm going to give you just 30 seconds to a minute to think about some of these prompts. You can write or you can talk. Yeah, you can write, talk, or think. So you can talk to someone next to you about it if you want. Okay, I'm gonna give you 30 more seconds because people are actually talking and that makes me happy. 30 seconds. Okay. There's nothing like thinking about your own failures at 8:15 in the morning to really start the day right, so apologies for that. But here's the thing, this work that we want to do, this work of helping all of our students succeed and feel happy and safe and empowered, it's not easy work. It's some of the hardest work that there is, and it's harder for the fact that to do it well, to be innovative, we have to look our own fear of failure in the eyes. We have to risk having confidence in crazy ideas. In my career, I've risked insisting that every one of my 9th graders must perform on stage in front of an audience. I've risked taking a play that was originally written for 3 characters and adapting it for 50 actors. I've risked teaching students about the history of youth protest movements, and then I've watched as they've taken that and used it to organize a school walkout. I've risked examining my own privilege and being open with my students about the ways that that privilege has made my life experiences profoundly different from theirs. I've risked taking on leadership opportunities that intimidated me. I've risked challenging ideas with which I didn't agree. I've risked believing that my students are smarter and more capable than popular myths tell me that they are. And I've failed more than once. I've failed in the classroom and I've failed out of the classroom. I've misspoken. I've had to apologize. I've been embarrassed. I've been ashamed. I've wished I could just disappear somewhere. But sometimes it's only through failure that we will find our way to success. Failure forces us to re-examine what we think we know, to look at it from another angle, to access new resources, to ask for help. Failure helps us see with more clarity exactly where we need to focus our work. So what would happen if everyone in this room, teachers, administrators, policymakers, advocates, what would happen if we all risked failure? More importantly, what would happen if we talked about that failure? If we peeled back the layers and got to the core of what has driven us to grow? Would our students learn to redefine failure as an opportunity to generate new ideas? Would they value perseverance? Would they reject a narrative that tells them that their boundaries are predetermined? And to all of the administrators in the room, I want to challenge you to think about the environments that teachers work within in your schools or districts. Is it safe for your teachers to innovate? If they try something new and it doesn't go as planned, how do you respond? Does that affect your view of that teacher's effectiveness or commitment? Does it make you less likely to trust their ideas in the future? Do you want to support them as they work to improve whatever went wrong, or would you rather they just stick to the script? You have so much power to affect how your teachers think about themselves and about their work. You've got to make sure that the way you talk about failure supports teachers in constantly challenging themselves to learn and grow. Because we can't be afraid to fail. If we fear failure, we won't take the kinds of risks that we need to take in the service of our students. We will avoid having courageous conversations about the ways that poverty and racism and inequity and low expectations harm our kids. We'll shy away from thinking big about how we might fight for social justice within and through our schools. We'll miss opportunities to challenge misinformation about the real work of teaching and learning. Ultimately, if we're afraid to fail, we will accomplish only a fraction of what we're able to do. So I want you to do one more thing. At my school every year, we start the year by writing intentions. So think of these as statements about what we want to accomplish over the course of the year. They're not goals, but they're statements of how we will be or who we will be throughout the year to be our best selves. So I want to ask you one more time to either think or write or talk just for a minute about your intention for the remainder of this year. And by that I mean school year. As you think about the rest of the school year and everything you hope to accomplish, I want you to consider who you have to be to make that happen, and how you have to think about yourself and about your work. What mindset do you have to have? What mantra do you have to repeat to yourself to be your best self and to accomplish the goals that you want to accomplish for and with kids? So I want you to just take a minute to write or think or talk about that. To complete that sentence, my intention is to. And again, it's not a goal, it's a way of being. And I am going to ask a couple people to share after that. Okay, I'm going to give you 30 seconds and then ask for some people to share. Okay, I'm going to start by sharing mine. So in April, I was in DC, and I got to hear from the 2014 Minnesota Teacher of the Year, Tom Rademacher, and he said to me and Becca and the rest of our class that if the goals we have for ourselves don't make us uncomfortable, then they're the wrong goals. So my intention for this year as National Teacher of the Year is to do the things that make me uncomfortable. That's my intention. So I would love if I had 3 other brave people who've had your coffee this morning who would be willing to share your intention with the room. Do I have anyone? Oh, you tricked me. I thought you were raising your hand. You're the best.
I know that. Whoa, that's loud. My intention is to share the positive.
Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, that's a perfect example. 2 more, yes, over here.
Hi. My intention is to apply for the Presidential Award for Math and Science. I'm really afraid to not get it, but I'm going to try for it.
Love that. Thank you. 1 more.
Hi. My intention is to express myself authentically, especially when it is inelegant or contrary to the pervasive consensus or something about which I am vulnerable.
Thank you. I can't tell you the number of times I express myself inelegantly. You've seen a few this morning, so I appreciate that. Okay, so I'm going to tell you 1 more story. It is about this guy. This is a very accurate historical representation. Okay, so in 399 BC, in ancient Greece, there was an oracle, and he pronounced that the philosopher Socrates, this guy, was the wisest man in the world. And Socrates was like, that can't be right. I'm paraphrasing. There's a lot of stuff I don't know. So he decides to prove the oracle wrong by going to talk to some people who he thinks are wiser than him. So he starts out by interviewing someone who has a reputation for being wise, a politician. And he realized that even though a lot of people, including the politician himself, thought that he was really wise, he wasn't, because I'll get to that in a second. So Socrates talked to another politician, he realized the same thing, he's not very wise, and he makes enemies out of both of them. So he thinks, okay, if the politicians aren't wise, then surely the poets must be. So he goes to talk to some poets, and he asks them a simple question. He says, what are your poems about? They can't answer it. So he's like, okay, they're not wise. They're geniuses, but they're not wise. So then he goes to see some artisans, and they have the same basic flaw as the politicians and the poets. They believe themselves to be so wise that they were blind to their own ignorance, and they didn't know what they didn't know. So he considered the difference between himself and that first politician, and Socrates wrote, although I do not suppose that either of us knows anything really beautiful or good, I am better off than he is. For he knows nothing and thinks that he knows. I neither know nor think that I know. In this, I seem to have slightly the advantage of him. So Socrates decides he's going to start questioning anyone who has a reputation for being wise. And without fail, he finds that the people who think that they're wise are fools. And eventually, this won't be surprising to anyone in this room, young people start to follow Socrates around while he tells everyone that they're fools. And they start questioning everybody too. So now Socrates has 2 problems. 1, everyone's mad at him. And 2, they blame him for all the questions the kids are asking. So the Athenians put Socrates on trial for corrupting the youth. And it didn't go so well. So just before being sentenced to die, Socrates declared that the unexamined life is not worth living. If we accept the notion that we're wise, that we have everything figured out, that there's no room for new ideas, we're wasting our time. Because examining our mistakes is how we will learn. It's the way that we will become the wisest people in the world. After my mom died a few years ago, I was sorting through some of her things, and I found notebooks and notebooks and notebooks because she'd been a teacher, but she'd also been a poet and a writer and a mom, and she had all this stuff written down. And I found this one tiny little notebook tucked in amongst her things, and I opened it up and I saw this on the page. We've got to leave a legacy, like my mom did for me, that tells the people around us that taking risks is worth it. That tells them that success and failure are two sides of the same coin, that reminds them that every mistake we make can open a door to a new world of growth and discovery if we let it. This room is vibrating with possibility, and I'm excited to be here to learn with you all today. I want to thank you for being courageous, thank you for being innovative, and most of all, thank you so much for letting me talk to you today. I hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sydney. It's a really good viewpoint. Sometimes you don't look at the harder things to look at. So thank you very much. Thanks for your travels and being with us. It's very inspiring. And it's nice to hear we're nicer than some people. So take that, South. Good. Today's breakout sessions will begin at 8:45. You should all still have schedules and stuff inside your packet. Please go out and enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good morning, and let's stay inspired and keep up the good work. Thank you.